this whole concept of how we as CMOs are truly partnering with our CEOs. Comes up at every CMO club dinner we talk about. Comes up about the ability to be success, almost the difference between success and failure and stuff. So you've met Greg earlier today. I asked Greg to help lead the session. One request, really important request, to have a real meaningful conversation around this. I think we'd like to have for the next 45 minutes or 45 minutes, let's not tweet, let's not do anything externally. Let's keep this within the room. Is that fair? Fair. Okay, so with that, I'll turn it over to Greg. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks. Is anybody else getting a little seasick by that visual of that bottle? Like, I was sitting there getting nervous. It is 5 o'clock, though. You think we could have some beers, perhaps, soon. It's 7:15 in Chicago. All right, we got a couple more sessions. Pete works us hard, doesn't he? This is a long day, Pete. I can't see you, but anyway, thanks for the opportunity. What a great event. Wonderful to meet many of you. What I want to try to do over the next 45 minutes or so is walk you through what I think is going to be a treat. At Spencer Stuart, we spend a lot of time talking with CMOs and CEOs to try to figure out what it takes to be successful. And the reality is, and you've all seen the tenure study, and although we should be pleased that it's gone from 23 months up to 45 months, that doesn't exactly give us a warm, fuzzy feeling. It's still tough. The good news is, and I think this is a good news story, we've got 3 amazing marketing leaders that happen to be GMs that are great marketers. I'm going to quickly try to do a quick setup. I'm going to introduce them to you formally, and then we're going to do some Q&A, and I'd like to think of it like Vegas when we get into this. So the reality is, over the last 18 months, we, Spencer Stuart, shared in a study with the ANA, with Effective Brands, and Forbes and Adobe to evaluate what marketing organizations should look like in the year 2020. And there's a good news story throughout all of this, although lots of new words and the pressure in the kitchen is as hot as it's ever been. The reality is the CMO is actually in a great spot from which to lead. And what I want to try to do is to figure out what can you all in this room take away from what some great marketeers are doing. Your presence here today is step one, which is we need to collaborate, because it's one of the things that we found very quickly is top performing companies tend to share ideas with peers. And so that's the beginning of this, and hopefully we can do that over some cocktails. So during the Marketing 2020 study, there were 5 key trends that emerged. I just want to quickly walk you through them. We've talked about a number of them earlier today that have come up in the conversation. You may say, that's not any big surprise, but it's a good kind of true north for us to think about. The first one is to make sure your brand has a clear purpose. And that means both inside the company as well as with your consumer group. This notion of big insights over big data is really what we think you as the chief evangelist inside the company needs to drive, leading towards the total experience. And when we evaluated about 16,000 companies around the world in the study, no surprise, those organizations and CMOs that have put that at the forefront are the companies that have outperformed from a revenue and EBIT growth study. Lastly, the main focus for CMOs today that seem to be getting it done is leading that integration. And this is the platform that we think is actually a great spot from CMOs to lead from. And the last one has to do with the topic, which we're going to jump into, which is how do you get your CEO and or boss on board? We find that probably 70-75% of most companies actually report to the CEO, particularly in the big organizations. It's not practical and probably not appropriate, but we are pretty excited to let these folks tell you a little bit more about what they're doing. Specifically, there was a study done 7 years ago to ask CMOs how many of you, and this was self-proclaimed, how many of you spend time with your CEO working on the strategic growth agenda? Surprisingly, 7 years ago, it was only 38%. We asked that same question again this year, and the study was 16,000 people, and it's now up to 58%. Somewhat still a little bit surprising when we think that CMOs aren't at the table there. So with that, I'd like to quickly introduce, and I'm going to read bios so I don't get them wrong here. To my immediate left is Laura Mielek. She's the Group VP and Head of Global Marketing at EA Games. They happen to be the #1 game publisher. She has been with the company for 17 years. Interestingly, and you'll hear in her comments, she tends to take a broad business view. She just happens to be a good marketer. In her current role, she's responsible for all the marketing strategies, plans, and execution for global campaigns. She's a member of the senior leadership team and the CEO executive team. You may have seen her. She was profiled as one of Ad Age's Women to Watch. We love that study. And it's been a really, really busy fall for her. As you may have seen, they just launched last month Grand Theft Auto V5, which became the fastest selling entertainment product ever, over $1 billion in revenue sales in 3 days, which is amazing. So Laura, thank you for joining us. To her left, and I will tell you that the group gets progressively less good looking. Starting here, by the way. Mike will be there to you in a moment.
Someone has to set the curtain.
I got a great seat.
So Ian Rowden is a longtime friend, and he's a partner in CMO and head of brand for Virgin Group. He's responsible for the global marketing efforts of Virgin Group, and it's amazing, and we'll get into this a little bit, of some of their businesses. That he touches financial services, media, entertainment, communication, transport, travel, which is interesting. We'll talk about health and wellness and fitness. He's also a member of Virgin Galactic and Virgin Produced, which is the space travel and film production entities. He joined the company in 2011. He most recently was CEO of Saatchi & Saatchi in Australia, down under. You'll notice that from his eloquent accent. He spent his early days and has been in the hot seat of a CMO chair, both at Wendy's, at Callaway. He spent some early days at Coca-Cola. Lastly is my longtime good friend, it's been a long time, Mike Lenton. He didn't have to travel far. How far?
4 miles.
4 miles. It was convenient. We're glad you're here. He's the EVP and CMO at Farmers Insurance. He joined Farmers in 2011. In his current role, he's responsible for all of their marketing, branding, promotional sponsorship, digital, and communication. Prior to Farmers, he too sat in the hot seat. He was CMO at eBay and Best Buy. He sits on multiple boards, and he's going to give us a really interesting perspective. So let's dive into the questions, if we may. Mike, I'm going to start with you. If you don't mind, I believe you didn't have a recruiter involved in your recruitment. Can you tell me how the heck you ended up at Farmers?
First, I know that lack of a recruiter thing is really troubling to you. But, okay, so here's the story. I left eBay. I was just doing board work in a startup, and I left Procter and went to Progressive. And at Progressive, I met this guy named Jeff Daly. He ran Northeast Claims, and I ran New York. And we were friends, but not good enough friends to send holiday cards. I left in 1991. You got to remember the name Daly, because then he Facebooks me while I'm at eBay, and I accept his Facebook request because I always liked him. He's a good guy. And I wrote a column for a magazine for a year. I posted on Facebook. He'd read them, and he'd say, "Linton, this is a good column. It makes a lot of sense. Who is writing your stuff?" And I would say something funny back, and I realized through the post his company that he was CEO of is bought by Farmers, and he moves from Florida to LA. And then he Facebooks me and says, "If I'm in San Francisco where I live, or you're in LA, I will buy you dinner." I think that's great. Anyways, the market melts down. I change carriers, and I have Farmers as my insurance company. And I'm driving to a little startup work, and I have an accident at 60 miles an hour with a semi. A bad idea. I think it's really bad. Nothing happens to me. The car's smashed up. The tire's blown. And somehow I make it across 2 lanes. I walk away, and I remember Daly had been really good in claims. I Facebook him and say, "I am going to test your claim service." He says, "Let me know how it goes." Anyways, by day 7, he says, "How's it going, Mike?" And I say, "Jeff, come on. It's a 2003 Explorer. Fix the car or total it. But as a customer, you're making me mad, and you're costing yourself money because I have a rental car." He says, "Do you mind if I get involved?" I say, "No." All on Facebook. I say, "I just want the car."
He does type that fast.
I am really fast. Yeah, I'm like a Superman typer. I'm ugly, but I'm a fast typer. And then 2 days later, the car is fixed, and 3 people meet me to give me the car. I think that's a lot of people for a 2003 Explorer with $6,000 of damage. I Google him. He's the named rising CEO of Farmers. He Facebooks me. We haven't talked in 20 years, and he says, "Will you talk to us about marketing?" I think the whole category is pivoting around marketing. And I say, "I can't move, and I don't want to leave my boards." He says, "I'll work around that." And then we actually started talking, but it is amazing kind of the power of the network.
And then I went, "Shit."
Fortunate affection. Yeah. He didn't even type that. He just, never mind. But yeah, so anyways, it's kind of the power of the network, and it's been a lot of fun. I've been there 2 years.
What exciting. One of the things that we often find as we interview, we did a study a year ago called "What Do You Want From Me?" And Tom Seklow and I and a bunch of our colleagues went out and interviewed CFOs and heads of HR and CIOs, and it's kind of interesting to ask them what they want of you. The point is, and I'm going to go to you, Laura, you have a new boss, or excuse me, you have a new CEO, I should say, who you've worked with. Andrew Wilson had been with the company since, I think, 2000. This notion of peers and relationships, careful what you ask for because you never know when they're going to end up being your boss. And it often happens, we're seeing actually in the search business, more and more often companies are going inside, people that get the culture and have proven themselves. So what do you do, although he's not your direct boss, how do you bring a new CEO up to speed, on board, and try to be helpful in a chair like yours today?
Well, I mean, it is an interesting situation that he was with the company and coming in, because I think that, I'm sure we've all had new positions within companies that we were currently working in. You move into the new position, and because you've been there, people assume that you know a lot about whether that role or the company, and there are a lot of things that that someone may not know. I mean, he has a very new role. He leapfrogged the person who he was working for, who was also vying for the CEO role, to get the CEO role. So it was it was a very interesting last 6 months. We've had 3 CEOs this year. So our CEO for a long time left in March, and we had an interim CEO. And during that time that our search was going on, there was a lot of politics and palace intrigue going on at EA. So
You could make a game out of it.
We could, and that's definitely a possibility, or at least a book. I'm thinking. So it was an interesting 6 months as it led into the decision about who the CEO was going to be, and for Andrew to come in, some of that behavior and interaction and communication that went on, and who was picking which horse, and who were you going to back? One of the candidates literally told me in May, as we were heading this huge trade show, and I had a really big product that I was responsible for, and everyone wanted to be on stage to present this product. So I had 3 people volunteering I will present Battlefield, at E3. And someone just said, Laura, you just have to pick your horse. You have to decide who you're going to go with and who you're going to back to be the CEO. And I just said, gosh, I really just want to market my game and not have to make an alliance personally. So I think that
This is like Survivor.
it was kind of like Survivor. It's pretty exciting. It is, but it's very, very, very video game-like. But we have this person now who is a phenomenal person. He's a great human being, and he absolutely 100% deserves to be in the role. And I think that the best thing we can do for him is make the assumption, use the filter that perhaps he doesn't, that we just pretend that he came in from the outside, so we can really start taking him through the fundamentals of the whole business, because he was over our sports business at the time. And so I think that educating him and helping him ramp in the greater landscape of the company, and things like our investor conversations in Wall Street, is a whole new area for him. And I think that just assuming that he's an external candidate while having the benefit of someone that loves the company and knows the people and has been there a long time, I think is going to be our magic formula to get him on-ramped as quickly as possible.
One thing to take back next week, it's always interesting when we interview fabulous CMOs and you talk about their week. It's really an interesting idea for you to book an appointment with your CIO, CFO, whatever, and to ask them, how am I doing? What would you like to see me do more of? It's kind of an interesting thing that we often find great CMOs ask, because you never know when you're going to find yourself in that spot. Ian, you're another one. Interesting story. You happen to work for one of the most well-known people on the planet, prolific CEO. How in the world did you meet him? Will you dare tell us that story?
Wow, my story is even more chance than Mike's. I had been at Wendy's, where I'd been CMO for a long while. We sold Wendy's. I then took a 4-year holiday, as Greg likes to tell me, running Saatchi & Saatchi for Asia Pacific. Are there any advertising people in the room, by the way? There's not, are there? So it was a 4-year holiday, trying to convince that aging advertising brand to recreate itself. But I did get to spend lots of time in India and China and places like that. When our oldest daughter decided she wanted to come back to the US to go to college, I was speaking as a keynote speaker at an airline congress in Singapore. And the head of aviation from the Virgin Group was a speaker there, and in the audience was Richard Branson. I didn't know that at the time, but it turned out he thought what I had to say was interesting. It was the subject, incidentally, was about creating brands in a low-cost environment, which is challenging to everyone, as you well know. So had this conversation with him afterwards. He said, I think my partners would love to hear what you have to say.
He thought you were British, probably.
He did, actually. Well, it turned out there's another story behind that. But anyway, so he said, would you come talk to my partners? I did that, and turned out months afterwards, a couple of months afterwards, he called me up and just said, hey, listen, I don't know if you know, but the partners in that room are all people that I've met along the way and I've done deals with. They're all bankers and great deal makers, and I need a brand voice at that table. And they're all people that I've done deals with and I've hired, and would you come work for me? Would you come join the band, kind of thing? So very unexpected, and I went, shit, okay.
Another non-search job.
So,
Why
Mike,
did you even let us on this story?
because I love you guys. Mike, you've over your career had a chance to sit on a couple of boards, and you've gotten to see CEOs present. What has your boardroom experience watching the board operate taught you about how to get closer and partner with your boss?
I think a couple things that come away from the board perspective, at least for me as a CMO, is first, you have to understand how the company makes money and then be able to translate your marketing into that story. Boards kind of assume the marketing is pretty good, and you don't want to waste your time on the board evaluating like marketing and distribution and everything else. You want to assume it works, and your goal is to work with the CEO on strategy, growth, people, and then are the resources in the right place to execute against the plan. And so I consider my job as CMO not to sell my marketing to the company, but to show the company how our marketing helps drive the business today and tomorrow, and that we are actually good at allocating resources. And to do that, I think one of the keys is you have to be able to translate marketing language to the rest of the company in the way the company understands it, and the way companies almost always understand everything is through some financial lens. And if you can't do that, it gets a lot harder to communicate and move resources around.
Or do people think of you as a marketer in the building, or are you a business executive that happens to occupy that chair? How do you think about that?
I would say that the perception of marketing at EA and of me is of a business person. I would say that the role of marketing at Electronic Arts is quite expanded from where it was a long time ago, where we've become strategists, analysts. We have consumer insights, consumer relationships. We own P&Ls, but we have to be creative. So the diversity of that role has expanded significantly. And I think that in some companies, and certainly at EA, I would say that the CMO maps most closely to the CEO role, given the responsibilities and the breadth of business management that we have over our units and our areas of responsibility, that I think that CMOs are becoming the best successors to the CEO in many companies. And I know it's not true in all companies, particularly when you have tech or something like that, where it may come up from an engineering view. But I would say in a company like ours, and I can see in some of the companies and some of the speakers I heard from today, that I think it maps very closely to what a CMO or what a CEO does.
Ian, what do you do? You've got a prolific, at times runaway founder, brilliant. You know, somebody decided maybe it was you to flip on the switch and let this guy be prolific with his blogging, and I'm sure you're behind some of that. How do you begin to have that difficult conversation when you say, Sir Richard, you got to pull this back a little bit, this is bad? How do you handle that? And again, no tweets, please, or twits.
Sometimes better than others, I might add. But I think part of the conversation here, Greg, is around the type of CEO too. You know, some CEOs are very growth-oriented in their mindset. Some are more financially biased in their mindset and have sort of backgrounds that fit both of those categories. I think I'm fortunate that I live in a world where I've got a genuine growth evangelist, right? So, and a man who's prolific in the sort of current everyday state of what is the community of the world we live in today. So he's a very heavy participant on Google Plus and Facebook and everything that you can imagine. He's got over 12 million followers. So we're always pushing up against making sure that we have currency, making sure that, while we're focused on growth and talent and data and insight, all the things that you would expect, that we're communicating in a way that the purpose for the business, and people talk about purpose a lot, and we have a very clear brand purpose, but more importantly than that, we have a very clear business purpose. And that's, I think, a key role for the CMO, the marketing role today, is to make sure that if there is separation in that church and state discussion, that those things line up. And so I spend a lot of time with Richard, making sure that he's on brand and that he's on business, and that the things we're talking about are both interesting, they've got currency, they're human,
When's the last time he called you, and what was it about?
Yesterday, and we have a particular deal that I'm working on that is going a little sideways at the moment, so he gave me some advice on how not to allow that to continue to happen.
Friendly advice.
Which he does regularly. son, as he calls me. Great to be my age and have someone else call you son, you know. And then, but we talk. Sometimes we'll talk daily, and sometimes we won't talk for a couple of months, you know. And sometimes he's very on brand, and sometimes he goes off.
All right,
you know?
inquiring minds want to know, give us a story. Give us something that he's pulled off recently that you had to unwind or straighten out.
Oh, wow. Well, we did invite a well-known politician from Canada to go down to Necker Island to go kite surfing with him. The only
That
thing
was
that...
a she.
It was a she.
Yeah.
And the only thing that went a little off track in that idea, it was a fabulous idea because we were building up some relationships in Canada that were very important to some of our growth objectives, was that last time someone got invited to go kite surfing on Necker with Richard, they went naked, and
Naked in Necker.
the Canadian politician wasn't keen on that, and we went all sideways in the media while we tried to correct ourselves. So we sometimes cross the line. But, you know, if that's the worst thing that happens, it's okay.
Mike, that's a good one. Let's keep it amongst us, right? I can see the headline. Mike, the notion of being aligned with your boss in a 45-month tenure world, you got to make sure your boss has got your back and vice versa. What do you do to make sure he's aligned? How do you communicate? You've kind of got a cadence. You've done this a couple of times now. What works for you? What advice might you have about how to make sure you're set about where we're going?
So I do think Ian's right. You got different CEOs have different strengths and things that they want, and you have to figure that out. And then you want to just like you want to translate marketing in the way the company hears it. You want to adapt to the rhythm of your CEO for the most part. So with my current CEO, Jeff, the rules were really clear going in of what he wanted and how I plan to deliver them, and he's been really true to that. He never comes into the marketing arena at all unless we ask him in.
Does he fancy himself as a marketer?
No.
Because oftentimes we find
He does not.
CEOs that
In
do.
fact, he does not even want to look at like any of the advertising or any of the stuff we do.
Pretty unusual.
Like when we do big things,
lucky.
he's not in it. Yeah. And so the big sponsorships and everything, we keep him in the loop, but he has backed everything we have decided. I think the way we're very involved in the strategy. That's where we probably have the most discussion. And the research arm, we spend a lot of time on that with him. I think the thing that I do with him is we have dinner once a month where we'll talk stuff through over a couple hours. And then we have just an ongoing dialogue, a lot of it via text or phone, because he's traveling quite a bit for the job, I just keep him in the loop on what's going to happen. And if anything is going sideways, I don't let it get to him.
No surprises.
No surprises. So if something is going wrong or backwards, he knows about it before anybody else. And he's never had a problem with that. He's always backed us in that. I think you never want your CEO to get blindsided by some marketing, PR, or comms thing you do where he isn't ready for it, because that's just wrong. Yeah. And in return, he has really given us pretty free hand to change a lot of things.
I love what you're putting out right now. The idea of training is one of the things that popped up in the Marketing 2020 studies. Not surprisingly, perhaps, those organizations that have invested in marketing training have outperformed. This notion of training up both your boss, the CEO, and the organization is important. How do you do that at EA? How do you raise the marketing IQ in the building?
Well, I think that the pace at which marketing is innovating today is significant, and I think it's, and I agree with Mike and Ian that all CEOs are different. So the CEO that I've had the most experience with was our CEO that left in March, who was a marketer. He not only flattered himself a marketer, he actually came from marketing. Yeah. And so, but he hadn't marketed in a very long time, and so he had a very different point of view about what great marketing looked like. And so I think that the pace at which we are able to measure, the pace at which we're able to evaluate consumer behavior and respond to consumers is so high now that our marketing programs, or at least the face of our marketing programs, have changed radically. And it changed faster, I think, than the organization was able to keep up with on just a change management perspective. And so I started piloting project, and I collected a group of people I called them Team Jedi, because we're a video game company and we like to label things and have nerdy titles. So I had my Jedi team of analysts, and we would just pilot projects, and we would, instead of it being scary and spreading something across the whole company, I use it as an opportunity to say, look at how innovative we can be and look at the progress we could make, and if we scaled this, we took this one project and put it across 10, look at what we could accomplish. And I would have once a week lunches with, when he was in town, with our CEO, and we would talk about these projects. And it was a great social, it felt relaxing, it didn't feel scary, and that, okay, we're going to roll out Facebook advertising, and we're going to cut all TV, and this is where we're going to go, and that's very scary. And so piloting projects, I thought was a great way for us to have wins, get people excited, and the good news about the pace of what we're changing is that we can do these really fast. And so I had my team of Jedi for a couple of years, and now my Jedi are, spread across all of our projects and all of our teams. But this was a CEO who, unless our billboard was on the 101 that he was driving by, he just didn't feel like I was thinking big enough about our marketing programs, and it was pretty frustrating because that had one of the lowest ROIs of my whole marketing and media mix at the time. So I really needed to convince him.
But you know what? You should probably buy that billboard.
Just get it over with.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that is actually
For $10,000, just get it over with.
It's not beneath us, right?
No, actually, no, that's right, actually, and that is an important CMO-CEO relationship. We did go to that. There was an area around his house in San Francisco, around the Haight that he lived, and we did buy it. And it was very low cost, and the cycles that it saved our teams and ourselves was significant, actually.
That's brilliant.
The internal ROI on that is magnificent.
Well, it was. As far as productivity and team morale and things, all kidding aside, it was really the right thing to do. Yeah.
One of my favorite CMOs that just stepped down is a guy named Bill McDonald that you all may know, that was at Capital One, literally a legend. And he took what he called the sweaty Vikings that you see on What's in Your Wallet, the campaign. They call them the sweaty Vikings. And he would get the group together almost every other month, the whole company, to rally the employee base around it. What do you three do? Best practices around creating the rally cry, whether it's a platform for your CEO or for your own marketing team. Any thoughts, tricks on how you get people fired up about the cool stuff you guys are doing? Not all at once.
Oh,
Yeah, go, please.
All right, so we do a lot of stuff. Like, as we change things, we have public visibility of the change. So we just changed the logo after 57 years, which is a hot thing in an insurance company because you have all these exclusive agents that have to buy the logo for their office.
Yeah.
They have to personally invest in it. So any change has to drag the company along. We did the public change. We let the whole company watch the voting as we tested it with consumers. And then when we finally announced it to the 3,300 agents in Chicago, we actually never took the stage. We let the agents present it. And so it became more than our thing. It was really the company presenting the logo to itself with marketing was never in the front.
Right, Ian?
Richard's always had a philosophy of if you get the sort of culture and the people focus internally right, then in a business where you build experiences, which is what we largely do, you'll cater to your customer base the right way. The DNA of our culture and our people has always been built around rock and roll and parties. And as unsophisticated as it sounds, we have parties regularly at Virgin.
I heard some of them.
And we celebrate them. We celebrate the fact that they might make it into the media because we go too late, too loud. And we build a bit of an urban myth around the legend of what it is like to work at Virgin. The trick then is to make sure that you keep that gap closed between the expectation coming in and the expectation after you've arrived there.
The rock and roll. I'm sorry, please.
We work hard at that. Just again, it's a culture and a DNA thing of making sure that you kind of motivate people around what the business is about, with integrity to what the DNA is of the business.
It makes me a little nervous when you think rock and roll, parties, and spaceships.
Exactly.
You got to spend, can you please spend a moment about
airplanes.
Galactic? Tell people about what Galactic is if you haven't heard of it. This is
Sure.
incredible.
Well, what is Galactic? Galactic is the sort of culmination of a 20-odd year dream, 30-odd year dream that Richard had, which was that nobody back in the 70s and the 80s was paying any attention on how the average guy or gal might find their way into space. And he believed, like all dreamers do, that space is a place everybody ultimately wants to go to. 1996, he registered the name Virgin Galactic, and then he went, oh shit, better do something about this. So Since then, we've been building a business. Virgin Galactic will be a commercial space tourism business that will take passengers in a rocket, 6 at a time with a couple of pilots. It's a 3.5-hour adventure starting out of a spaceport in New Mexico.
How many in line, and what did they
Which has
pay?
been purpose-built. 700 people have already bought tickets, $200,000 a seat.
A lot per minute, isn't it?
It's,
for 3 hours?
it's an incredibly ambitious and exciting, and from a brand point of view, very binary thing to do. It'll work or it doesn't, right? And it will work because the people that are in it are committed and passionate and being given all the entrepreneurial leeway to create. So it's very exciting. And I just say, if you're interested, follow it. And I'll also take orders for anyone who wants to buy a seat while I'm here.
The website.
Is there a raffle or anything like at the rock and roll party? A raffle for a winner?
It
Somebody's
could
gonna need to
actually
assure that.
be a lottery.
Yeah,
You never know.
that's right.
How do you go about the communication and kind of firing people up,
Rally.
using it as an employee engagement vehicle?
Yeah, I
Great
mean,
marketing.
I'm very lucky. I work at a video game company, and we are the product, the very product that we market every day is incredibly fun. So, but the product is very important. I'm a very passionate product marketing marketer, and I believe that you have to know your products incredibly well. And so, once a week, I rally my team, and we get into the marketing pit, and I have global teams all over the world. And so every Thursday night is our game night, and we pull competitors' products, our own products that are coming out, and it's not quite as rock and roll as Virgin, but it is, beers, wine, and some RPGs, which is really fun. So that's that is yeah, you can dress up as a little fairy and run around a game and level up. It's great, but I know, but
With an RPG.
it's really
Okay.
fun.
A fairy with an RPG. I'm just
Exactly, yeah,
Beers.
yeah.
We need.
So I think that is the social thing, and then another thing that we did. Electronic Arts is it's a very type A culture, a lot of overachiever sort of people, and as a byproduct of that, we were very risk averse, and so the idea about failing was paralyzing for our culture. And I noticed that with my teams as we were embarking on new ways to measure how effective we were or how effective we were not in our marketing programs, and that was a very emotional challenge for people. So I created this program called Success Through Failure. And so once a month, a team member would be able to raise their hand and talk through a failure that they had, and that we would celebrate the failure. And so it could be, hey, we announced a product, we spent $500,000 developing a trailer, and our engagement and our video views weren't as high as it needed to be, and we would learn and talk about why that was the case. And we learned a tremendous amount. But it was incredibly intimidating for people initially, and candidly, EA as a culture still doesn't entirely embrace this, so it has just been carved out for my team. So those decks and those presentations and those communications have not gone broadly across the whole organization for other people to learn as well, because it feels bad to fail still. But I think it's incredibly important to celebrate and learn, so you can continue to progress. And so that was a second kind of rallying team bonding thing that we did to make sure that we were innovating and trying new things.
Great question, Pete, or somebody in the back. How much time do we have? I don't see a timer here. If somebody can tell me. Laura, the notion of video games have been in the press a lot, and not all the press is positive now on some of the correlation between some of the violence and some of the games. We will assume that some of your game titles have been associated with that. How do you prepare your CEO to handle that kind of discussion?
Well, it was really in the press quite a bit more in the beginning of the year when our other CEO was there, and our CEO, John Riccatello, who left in March, he actually led that for us. He was head of the ESA, which is a board that regulates our rating system, so he was a very passionate advocate for it. I would say that it's something that is a belief, and within the company that the majority of our executive team is aligned on, about what the press is saying one thing, our belief is something else, and we stay very true, and we're all very aligned to that belief based on millions of dollars of research and things that we know to be true about the impact that our games and our entertainment has on consumer or on society.
Mike, question for you as it relates to getting your peers on board. First question, at Farmers, are you all in the same bonus structure when you look at your GC and CFO? How do you handle making sure they've got your back? That executive team, how many around the table, as an example?
So 11 around the table.
11.
Yeah. There's Jeff set up a series of we have a once a month meeting. I think my whole theory about marketing is it's got to be an open tent. Everyone has to see what you're doing, so you don't, and then you have to have at least some recurring set of math that everyone can watch. And then I think the way you ensure everybody has your back is you shoot the stuff that fails really fast.
Exactly.
You don't let the company shoot it for you. It's DOA when you come in.
Raise
the
your
room.
hand first.
Yeah, you raise your hand. You call the missile strike in on yourself,
You bet.
and then you get a huge amount of credibility for cutting the stuff that doesn't work. And then over time, you build up a lot of capital. When you say bet on me, I mean you can build up a lot of capital actually in a year. When you say bet on me, they'll let you. I mean, we did when I was at Best Buy, we did some incredible bets, including like the deal with the Stones and everything else. And that was where you have enough cards and you say, I'll bet, and they'll back you, but they won't back you if you have never told the truth and killed your own stuff.
That's
And
the new
you
way
also
to
have to
see
tell the truth about this stuff. We put it out, it blows, and we're going to take it off. Or we tried this, it failed.
And you're nodding in vehement.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've observed just in a table not dissimilar to Mike's, where you've got 7 or 8 strong partners, and then in placing a lot of CMOs, Greg, into a lot of our operating companies. And you touched on it earlier when you talked about the tenure of CMOs and you talked about the sort of time that we're in. We all know the world we live in today, so we won't get into that. But I think the opportunity for the CMO to come to the table in a new light, right, with a new frame of reference, using access to the world that we now connect with consumers through, whether it's social media and all the other things, again, let's not get into the detail here, is creating a platform to sort of flip this sort of historical kind of woe is me, I'm the CMO and it's tough here in this world, into a whole new framework where you sit there and you can say, here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing it. We don't know the answers to all this stuff. We haven't proven a lot of this yet, but this looks really good and we know from our consumers that works, so we're going to pursue that. That we're going to kill because it just doesn't work. And if we get people who are in that frame and able to manage the world around them like that, I think there's a lot that is being done and will continue.
Well, going back to the board question, nothing frustrates a board more than when the board knows the idea isn't going to work ahead of management. And you're watching it, and you're waiting for management to kill it. And if the board has to finally say, hey, Greg, are you going to kill this thing? It just starts destroying credibility on all sides of the deal. So what you want is management to say, we tried it and it didn't work, ahead of the board. And I think it's a really big deal.
Great. We've got to wrap up. One last question. If each of you would give us 10 or 20 seconds on one bit of advice for partnering with your CEO most effectively, what would it be?
Regular, as regular as it can be, no surprises, right? Kill things quickly, be prepared to say this didn't work. And then on the other side of that, be brave. So here's something I see. I'm not sure if it's right yet, but I want to go get after that.
I agree with everything Ian said, and the one thing I would add is, depending on the CEO's job, the pressures on him or her is enormous. And the more you can understand the pressures and why they might see things differently or why they might have to do things differently, the easier it is to be of help to them. If you're always selling them, it's really not a help. You don't want to sell them, you want to help them.
Laura, bring us home.
Yeah, no, I
Please.
agree with what Ian and Mike have said. I also have had my greatest success when we can spend more time talking about strategy and whether it be about the product or the consumer up front. So we're aligned and consistent about creative and execution filters. We're all coming from a similar filter. I've had my best success versus trying to fix a TV ad as it's out, or having the CEO get involved in the middle of a marketing program. If you've invested the time the year or two before and really have gotten aligned on strategy, I think that is sets the table for the most successful outcome.
Great. Thank you all. You all are an inspiration of what we're trying to do. Thank you for coming down. I know you did this special. At least a couple of them will be here for dinner tonight, but thank you all. All right.
Thanks, mate. Thank you, Greg.